All right, good morning. I would like to call the order the March 1st, 2023 Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Staff, could you please do the roll?
At this time, I'm only asking those TAC members attending in person to respond by saying "here" when I call your name. I want to remind you to unmute your microphones by pushing the button on the base prior to responding. The light will turn red. Alternates, please also state your name if you are attending on behalf of a TAC representative. Jim Bell. Naresh Makavarapu. Thank you. Gary Dunmeyer.
Here.
Jason Kaufman. Denise Malone.
Here.
Jamie Brown. Terrence Bailey is absent. John Paul O'Connor.
Present.
Alex Hansen.
Here.
Valerio Urchio.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kenny Wilson. Thank you. Gary Sypek is absent. Brian Davis.
Here.
Yash Nagal. Absent. Aaron Hoffman is absent. Joyce Kai is joining us virtually. Lorraine Cargill. Thomas Hernandez.
Here.
Thank you. Roberto Treviso. Kim Delaney. Kim Glass Castro.
Here.
Christopher Marsh.
Here.
Michael Odell.
Jonathan Reinsvold here for Michael Odell, and I'd like to note that Mr. Odell has retired.
Thank you. John Crane.
Here.
Natalie Crowley.
Here.
Mo Elturk.
Here.
Great. We do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other modifications to the agenda? I'm moving to item 1B.
There is a modification to the agenda, Mr. Chair. The following members are requesting to participate remotely. Joyce Kai, due to ongoing staff shortages at the school district of Palm Beach County, and she has joined us online. And Jim Bell, due to ongoing medical issues that prevent in-person attendance, and he has joined us online.
All right, TAC members, are there any objections to allowing these members to participate remotely? All right, very good. Seeing none, these members are approved to participate remotely. And staff, please note their attendance in the minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Move on to item 1C, motion to approve minutes for December 7th, 2022 and February 1st, 2023. Are there any changes to the minutes? Staff? No? All right. Then can I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Jonathan?
Second.
Okay, and that was Jonathan.
I had John Paul O'Connor and Alex Hansen.
Sorry?
I had John Paul O'Connor and Alex Hansen.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I have a motion by Jonathan, correct? Or I missed it?
John, I think it was John Paul.
Sorry, yeah, okay. And I have a second by Alex. Any discussions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Mr.
Going-
Chair, for the record, I'd like to note that Roberto Treviso has joined us in person.
All right, thank you. All right, 1D, general public comments and public comments on agenda items. Instructions on how to provide public comments are included in the agenda. Staff, have there any general comments?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 1E. Comments from the chair and members' comments. I don't have comments. Any of the members has any comments? All right, thank you. Then at this time, of course, we'll have any comments that are regarding items that are not on the agenda. So for members participating remotely, please utilize the raise hand feature in the Zoom platform, and then remember to unmute yourself once you are recognized. Do we have any raised hands? Thank you. We move to item 1F. TAC liaison report. With this, I will invite Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a pretty packed liaison report, so look forward to getting through this hopefully rather quickly. Safe Street Summit Awards, we wanted to highlight a handful of awardees and some runners-up. So the Complete Streets Community Award went to the Village of Wellington. The Complete Streets Champion Award went to Natalie Crowley from the City of Palm Beach Gardens. And want to congratulate also the nominees, including TPA board members, Councilmember Drucker, Commissioner Fox, Councilman Napoleon, and Councilman Hamera. So I invite you all to give folks a round of applause. It's a great recognition of the hard work that's being done in this region. So congratulations to the awardees and the runners-up. We also want to congratulate the City of Westlake, who adopted a complete streets policy on February 7th. Again, round of applause for John Paul. We'll be highlighting some opportunities for folks to learn more about that opportunity in the future, and you can get more info palmbeachtpa.org/safety. I want to highlight an opportunity to provide input on an upcoming interchange project. The I-95 at Woolbright Road Interchange public meeting will be held March 8th at 6 p.m. You can receive more details at d4fdot.com. We also have our public participation plan. The TPA public participation plan is still available for review and comment through March 16th. You can find that plan, the draft materials at palmbeachtpa.org/PPP. March is Florida Bicycle Month. It's a great opportunity to celebrate bicycling. TPA will be hosting several events to recognize Bike Month. So March 7th, we will have a webinar and then a bicycle ride on March 31st. You can find more details about that at palmbeachtpa.org/events. You can also save the date for several upcoming workshops. I mentioned Complete Streets is the first of those that will be held March 24th. And then we also have a Vision Zero workshop coming up next month, April 28th. Palm Beach, Royal Palm Beach will be holding a bike rodeo. That'll be on March 25th, which is a Saturday. It's at 9 a.m. You can get more details about that event, royalpalmbeach.com. There will also be mobile tours upcoming, Palm Tran and Tri-Rail Tour on April 7th. You can get more details about that at palmbeachtpa.org/board. The next TPA Governing Board meeting will be March 16th at 9 a.m. More details for that at palmbeachtpa.org/board. TPA is currently undergoing our federal certification review. We'll have a public meeting on that April 3rd at 5 p.m. And then the following day, we will be having an all-day 8 to 5 staff meeting to go through that review process. And then the final item to go through today, you'll find some details, more details about this on our liaison report. The back page is our TPA funding applications. The funding cycle is closed, and so we're going to provide a quick summary of those details. Just a few highlights. These are produced in alphabetical order. There is no ranking. They have not been scored at this point. We will be working through that process. So I'll give you a few highlights, but more details to come on the funding applications. In just a moment while we pull up the, no, we're not pulling up the slides. I'm sorry. I thought we were going to pull up slides. So we had local initiatives program, 7 applicants for $17,778,626. Transportation alternatives, 6 applications for $5,111,466. And state road modifications, 2 applicants for a total of $6,211,860. So we look forward to coming back with additional details as we score those. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Now, members of the committee, do you have any comments on this item? All right.
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question as it relates to the funding applications for 2023 as presented, Nathan. Can you shed any light on the amount of funds that are going to be available? Do you have any idea in terms of the LI and the TA and the state road modifications in terms of the total amount of funding that's going to be available?
I am not certain on that. I don't know if Andrew has any details to share.
Yeah, go ahead. Andy?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Andrew Euler, Deputy Director of Programs. Is that on? Okay. We've been discussing these previous meetings about funding. The Transportation Alternatives Program uses those federal transportation alternatives dollars. And we put them all towards that program. And that's roughly around $6 million available for that. Possibly a little bit more than that. And then for the state roads, that's really a larger funding pot that goes towards multiple priorities. So it's going to our major products on the state road system. It's going to major priorities of the state as well. And then it also gets put on resurfacing and other maintenance projects. So that one doesn't have an actual specific amount that we're looking to get funded towards that. But that'll be prioritized with their other ones that haven't been funded yet in the state roads list, such as Atlantic Avenue, State Road 7, and there's a few other ones on that list as well. And then for local initiatives, that's another federal funding source that we have roughly $23 million available. But with that as well, we're still trying to fund some of those major products we have on the state road system. And so depending on how that shakes out with the money available from the state, and then what the costs are for those, some of that money might go, or all of it might go to that, to the state roads. So we don't know for certain yet until you see that list of priority products and you get a little bit more details from AFDOT about how it's shaking out. So the only one that's like more of a guaranteed pot would be that transportation alternatives.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the liaison report? Go ahead.
I guess follow up with the question on funding. But couple meetings ago, there was the issue in which the projects that had received funding for the last cycle were going to lose that funding because of additional costs associated with the State Road 7 project. We have a lengthy discussion here. The committee eventually voted to recommend inclusion of those projects in the list. Again, I'm trying to now reconcile what eventually happened at the board level with those projects, what is happening with those projects in relation to this. I'm not sure what the ultimate outcome of that process was in relation to the projects that were submitted for the last cycle, and they were kind of in limbo as of our last discussion.
Thank you, Alex. I can respond to that as well.
Yeah, sure. Good question.
So the list of priority products that was adopted had those products under local initiatives, right? And there's products on the state roads and then also transportation alternatives. When AFDOT created their draft tentative work program that was seen by you all, and then finally adopted by the governing board for that approval of that. In that, we had a resolution that the governing board put forward, and in that resolution, it talks about working with AFDOT to try our best to get State Road 7 funded in other means, and then working to get those local initiatives products that were not funded in the draft funded. So we're still working with AFDOT when it comes to those. And then also part of the discussion was that the products that are already prioritized on that list remain at the top, right? So those ones in the local initiatives list, when you see the work program come out and we make our tip in a few months here, and you still don't see those products that are funded yet for the work program or for the local initiatives, those ones that are unfunded would still stay at the top of the list. So that was discussed here a little bit, that was the direction of the board. So the next time you all see the list of priority projects, those ones that are still not funded for local initiatives will still be at the top there. But they're not all funded at this time.
So, but that may affect the funding for these projects?
Correct.
Okay, so some of these projects may not get funding because of those other still not funded projects from the last cycle.
Correct.
Do you
Which-
remember how much short we were on that round? So it seems like you have here maybe $6 million in the LI excess money available if you even approved all of the applications.
I think that it might have been more than that, correct? What's the,
I know it's probably. don't
right, it
have-
looks like the TPA, the requests for funding from the applicants, if you total the preliminary amount is 17 million, closer to 18 million for 7 projects were submitted this round. So off the top of my head, I do not know how much is outstanding on the ones that are still not programmed.
Yeah.
But yes, those would be taken off the top. Some of those are going, we're trying to find other means of getting those funded. I think one, we're trying to move the TA if possible, and we're trying to find other avenues to get other ones funded. So, but you are correct, like all these, most likely, you know, if you, they probably won't all get funded, but we're trying, you know,
Right, they have to go through the vetting and scoring and, yeah. All right. Thank you. You are good, Alex?
Mr. Chair,
You want to keep that up?
Mr. Chair,
All right, Jason, it seems, you wanna talk first? Go ahead.
I just wanted to, for a point of clarification on how the process works, right? We as a board or a committee make our recommendation. A list of priority projects goes to the board. That doesn't mean that the whole list is going to be funded. That is all going to be funded pending funding availability, right? So we're establishing the priorities and then move that list forward. And then we work with the TPA staff and the municipalities to try and fund all of those. So this happens every year. What happens is when we come back with a list, it's these candidates projects are either eligible or not eligible for funding. We always ask the TPA to oversubscribe projects because we never know when money is going to come down from various legislation. So I just wanted the group to understand. That's kind of what happened last time, Alex, was that the list came up. We had to fund prior commitments. And so nothing got funded that cycle, and we're working with the TPA to work those in as we rebalance the work program. It has been stated here that the funding disappeared. That it didn't happen that way. And so I wanted to clarify that the list is never a committed. There's never a commitment to fund the whole list. We fund it based on funding availability and the priorities.
Sorry if I can
Yeah,
respond.
sure, go ahead.
I kind of disagree with the characterization that this was kind of business as usual. It was not. We had never had a situation in which the entire list of projects lost funding.
It did not lose funding.
Well, they indicate, the TPA
prioritized.
indicated that they had funding, that funding was available for them, and then that funding was transferred to a different project. So the entire list of projects, so that has never happened. I've been in this
I
committee
agree
for
that it's
20
not business
something
as
years.
usual, but the process is not as you explained it. It's not that they were given funding and the funding was
Well,
taken.
they were promised funding. They received letters indicating that they were going to be receiving the funding. So that's it. There were commitments made, and that's why the municipalities understood that the funding was going to be available for the projects.
Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
just more clarification. The letters that we do send out do say that your product is eligible for funding, but in the letter, it also states that you are not guaranteed funding until you get into the work program and to our tip. So just for clarification
Right.
on that. And then on top of that, I know it's just in the letter there, but obviously there's been some headaches around this in the past year. So we're trying to do our best too about being more forthcoming and more transparency there to make sure we get it right for you all. So you understand the process a little bit more as we move forward.
Certainly we'll have to deal with this. We discussed this before. The state has limited amount of funds, and we have a longer list of desires that cannot be funded all at once. So clearly there has to be some priorities given. So now the challenge for us probably is now if the amount of money needed to fund the unfunded prioritized projects from the last round need to be also put in the mix now, and we need to decide on how we would be recommending that they be prioritized, including the new ones that we have been applied for on this round. But the state has never said that they will make money, they will print money, because we wanted them to include projects that did not have the money for. Yeah. That was recommendations. Yeah.
All these projects are no longer funded for this project. So
Right.
I think that was the main issue. It became kind of this unilateral decision.
Mr. Hanson, can you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
That we were not purview to, and then again, we had, some of us had to bring it up at the meeting, two meetings ago. So that I think was the main concern, how the process work or didn't work.
And we did well. We made the recommendation to the governing board, and they took our recommendation and they voted on it. And ultimately, if DOT needs to come back and says what they can do and what they cannot do. All right. Any more comments or questions? Oh, okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
One of the suggestions I have just to discuss, if we continue to have this situation where we have a list of projects that are not being committed for funding, maybe it makes sense for 1 year cycle to stop inviting new applications until we get to a decision, because one of the reasons I would say that there would be a significant amount of staff time and effort that would be put in preparing the applications and estimating the cost. And if there is a more lapse in the time frame to get that funding commitment, the cost increase in the cost, that would add more complexity. So as TPA and FDOT has an idea of how many applications from the previous cycle versus this cycle, and to see where the lapse in the funding, maybe it would make sense to make a decision on the next year cycle, so that we get to make a decision on how can we incorporate all the unfunded projects first before inviting new applications.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Sorry, Jason.
I think what will be helpful for the next meeting would be to see both the current applications with the previous applications together on one sheet, to see what the total is, and what is available and how everything kind of plays together now that those were pushed off.
Agreed. I think that's a valid point. They need all to be put in the same mix, brought back in the mix.
If I could just offer, when we do come back, we will then ensure that we bring back the former applications. I won't commit to that being next meeting, but when that item is brought back forward, we'll ensure that you have all the information.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I mean, similar to what Nathan was saying. I mean, really, I think that there's a lot of discussion going on in terms of funding, which is directly flowing from DOT. And from my understanding, the funding of the projects from last year's LITA are not limited to the TI, LI bucket. DOT has its budget, and DOT utilizes all of its information, including the priority projects that the TAC recommends. But as we saw a few meetings ago, there's a crossing of how to fund projects that have a deficit, that are long range road programs, as opposed to TI and LI. So I think DOT needs to do its thing, and at the appropriate time, obviously, I think I would just like to see, as much as possible, any advanced communication, because I think that is sort of the root of some of the concern that bubbled up at the TAC, because I think we learned at the TAC for the first time of this deficit issue. So I would just simply ask that the sooner DOT can provide a glimpse of this year's upcoming TIP, so we can see, where they're anticipating some of these deficits coming in. I think that would help the group a lot, so that we can see what's going on. I don't think DOT would be in the position next meeting, because from my understanding, there's just a lot of moving parts of what's going on with these funding sources. I understand that TAC staff is trying to reach out to alternate sources. They're not DOT, to try to fund that deficit from LI and TA. And that's great. I think that we want to prioritize. And for whatever it's worth, I would like to see mobility projects continue and not pause, I think that's a very important process of what we do. And so I would hate for this group, this body to pause mobility projects for the sake of, a deficit and, just to let people catch up. I think that sends the wrong message. So I think the key is communication and a glimpse of for whatever DOT can provide ahead of time so that we have a chance to review the information, because I don't think the deficit of what's going to happen in the TI and the LI is going to just be exclusively met with the TI and LI from last year. To compare them side by side, I don't think we can look, it's not an apples to apples comparison. From what I understand, you sort of have your whole pot and you have to prioritize everything. And then you have to see how you're going to make your budget work. So for whatever it's worth, I just think it would be very helpful to not go through what we went through this, a couple meetings ago, and any information ahead of time would be very helpful.
Right. I understand from you, Nathan, that we'll have next opportunity to discuss this more in depth once we have more information, right? We'll have.
Correct. TPA still needs to go through the scoring process and then, bring back that information. So you'll see a future item where we'll present the results of that process.
Very good. Any more? All right, let's move on then. Item 2, action items. I think we have just one action item on this agenda, and that is the motion to recommend approval of the TPA's Public Participation Plan, PPP, update. Melissa, I think, is going to be presenting. Hi, Melissa. I don't think that we ever met before, but nice to meet you. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Murray. I'm the Public Relations Director here for the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. And today I'll be presenting to you our draft 2023 Public Participation Plan. We're going to go through a couple details of it, but keep it pretty brief. I hope you all have had a chance to review the Public Participation Plan and take a look at it. If not, it's up until our board meeting for you to review a little more thoroughly if you'd like to. So first, just want to talk about the purpose of our public participation plan. This is a federally required document, just like the TIP, the LRTP, and the UPWP. The PPP is just as important as all of those planning documents. This is something that we have to essentially explain how we engage with the public. So this is what enables and encourages public awareness and input in the transportation planning process, how we prioritize projects. And there's a couple different sections to our public participation plan. One of the most important parts of that is how we publicly notice meetings, what our public comment periods are for those required work documents that I mentioned for our committee meetings, as well as our governing board. It also outlines ways that you can get involved with the TPA and our public outreach methods. I did want to mention, since we have had a few public comments that we've gotten back asking about tracking procedures, I'll go into that a little bit more in depth a little bit later on in our presentation, but we have tracking procedures that are outlined in our PPP, not specific tracking numbers, and I'll explain that in a couple minutes. So here's just a quick overview of our schedule. We opened this for public comment on January 30th of this year. We're doing committee presentations today and tomorrow, and then we'll be bringing this to our governing board on March 16th. Our PPP has a longer public comment period than any of our other documents. So 45 days of public comment is available for the PPP. We will be including in our final document in one of the appendices, all of the public comments that we've received thus far. So we have shared public notices of the PPP on our social media, which includes Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, as well as our biweekly newsletter, which please subscribe if you have not already. We have shared this in person with our partners and are also collecting written and electronic comments as well on our website and at our advisory committee and governing board meetings. So that's just a little bit of an overview of where we're at right now with the public participation plan. So in this year's update, the last time this was updated was in 2020. A lot of those updates at that time had to do with virtual meetings and a lot of things that we didn't have in our PPP before. When the pandemic happened, we had to kind of outline how we were meeting virtually and in hybrid formats and things like that. So this time we took a look at a couple other things. As you all know, we recently redesigned our website. So one of the main priorities of that is having greater ADA accessibility. We were doing okay before, but we had a lot of work to do in terms of bringing that up to speed to where it needed to be. So we redesigned our website to make sure that much more accessibility was created. We worked very closely with one of our VSAC members who is blind to see how he operates the website with a screen reader, making sure that he is able to access everything just like anyone else. We also included a section on our deliverables. So what types of things are we doing? What types of materials are we putting out into the community to educate people on transportation planning? So I mentioned our newsletters. We also are starting to work with our news partners, which I'll get into in just a little bit as well, but really working with them to share information about transportation planning. As well as any print materials. A lot of times we'll share those with you during meetings, any graphics we're creating, photography, videography, and then of course our digital outreach through our website and social media, as well as our tracking methods. That's going to be a little bit more in depth on the next slide, but that information we did need to add in and kind of explain a little bit more how we're tracking our public involvement and how we're measuring that. We also took a look at our transportation planning acronyms. There's, in my mind, like a million of them. So we looked through and said, which ones do we really need in here? Which ones are important? Are we missing any? So we did a thorough review of that. And then we also updated our limited English proficiency plan, which is an appendix of the PPP, but also a separate document on its own. We updated that with new census data from 2017 to 2021 in terms of populations who are limited English speaking populations within Palm Beach County. So when it comes to tracking, we did have a couple questions from people about how we do that, as well as what those numbers look like. So every month I put together public involvement activity reports. The screenshot on the left is an example of it. You don't need to look at any numbers or anything in this example, but those are shared every month with our Citizens Advisory Committee as well as our governing board. If you're ever interested in those, you can find those in the backup for those for the CAC as well as the board. The way that we structure those is basically looking at our strategic plan goals that relate to social media as well as news media. So the two bar graphs that you see on the left have to do with our social media impressions for the month. And then the one below it is for social media followers. We have already surpassed our strategic plan goal for this year of social media followers. We're probably going to end up doubling it, which is great. But this is something that we started really closely tracking when Cassidy and I started here at the TPA to really take a look at how many people we're reaching, how can we reach more people and get more information out to the public. And then on the right side of those reports, I always include our media coverage for the month. We have really started to focus on making relationships with our media partners, getting information out to them, because there are a lot of things that we all do here at the TPA that we need a lot of input on, whether it's the Okeechobee Boulevard multimodal corridor study, whether it is our upcoming LRTP that we're going to need a lot of public input from. We want people to know about that. And simply coming to a meeting or looking at our website isn't necessarily going to reach the amount of people that we need it to. So that's something that we're really trying to focus on. We've been able to reach millions of people just this year by doing that. Our strategic plan and annual report you're all familiar with, but we create yearly goals to engage the public. It's the first task in our strategic plan as well as our UPWP. So taking a look at things like social media impressions, followers, and media coverage, as well as presentations to community groups. How many partner agencies are we meeting with throughout the year to share the work that we're doing? And as I mentioned in our UPWP, we do report on those community presentations, our social media analytics, and those types of things. And then lastly, we use Google Analytics to track our website traffic. What are the most visited pages? Of course, who is giving us public comment in those forms so that I can follow up and give them any information they may be looking for, whether that has to do with a project or something else. So that's all I have for you today. Hopefully, like I said, you've had a chance to review the PPP in depth, but if not, it is still available on our website, palmbeachtpa.org/PPP.
Very good. Thanks, Melissa. Staff, any public comments on this item?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Fellow members, are there any comments, questions? All right. Thank you, Melissa.
No, Vicky.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Microphone, please.
I'm not, oh, there we are.
This one too.
I'm curious for the LEP, it was updated with new census information.
Mhm.
So is there a trend in terms of, are there increases there, and what languages, are you seeing, represented there?
Yes, so I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but yes, there is an increase. I believe that that has to do with just the increase in population here in general. The largest population of limited English speaking is Spanish. And then we also track, I believe, Haitian Creole as well. But Spanish is definitely the largest. So if you just look at the population numbers, though, overall, obviously that is increasing here in Florida. So we are seeing an increase in limited English speaking as well. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mo. I was just curious, do you have an idea of which of your metrics might best suggest effectiveness of the public outreach? And I maybe not at this meeting, but we have a huge representation of municipalities that each have their own public involvement program. I think it would be a great idea before our next update to kind of have a workshop maybe of best ideas or best practices from each of the municipalities, because I've seen some cool stuff on different municipality websites of ways they get information out. But if you had an idea of which metrics are working well for you for effectiveness.
Yeah, sure. So just for a little background, I'm probably a little biased because I used to be a news reporter. So I understand the impact that can have if you are able to share a story through the media. Because, for example, if you try to encourage people to come to a public meeting, I mean, generally, you're not going to have a ton of people show up compared to if you're sharing a story on, let's just say, WPTV, for example. It depends on what hour that's being shared, what show that's in, if they also then publish it on their website, and then if they also then share it on social media. But generally speaking, you can reach tens of thousands of people just by sharing a story on the news. And what ends up happening is when we do that, we tend to get feedback from the public in that way. So that seems to be working really well for us. And we're also able to share information about public meetings through the media. So for the Okeechobee study, we did have quite a few people show up to those meetings by having them kind of blast that out and share that information. Social media, I think, can be good. One thing that I'm sure a lot of your municipalities do is if you're essentially putting money behind those posts and boosting them on social media so that they're reaching either a larger audience or a targeted audience or both. So again, going back to the Okeechobee study, we targeted that corridor where their study was and made sure that the people who lived and were along that corridor, based on location, were getting information about the study, the surveys we were doing, upcoming public meetings and things like that. So that's been really helpful. And then also just really having relationships out in the community. I think Valerie is obviously very involved, our executive director, in the community, and she's been able to introduce myself and our staff to a lot of community groups, a lot of community leaders, and making those connections is really helpful. So yes, news media and social media can be helpful, but also that person-to-person interaction is very helpful as well.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. First of all, I just want to say that I think that this TPA does a very good job in its public outreach in general. The outreach that occurs on social media, and your executive director is always out and about and has a ton of relationships and does a great job. And, you know, when you go on the website, you know, everything is very organized and you can always access these meetings, you know, online. So I think overall there's really good work being done. I just wanted to share a thought. You know, I attended the Safe Street Summit, and sort of a theme that seemed to be really apparent in many of the panelists was outreach, and just, you know, really, if you have a traditional meeting, and I think many of us probably see this as municipalities or the county, you know, a lot of the time, you know, when you have a particular project, that traditional setting of having a meeting and trying to get public to show up, you know, it struggles sometimes. And so you just, it's sort of an old outdated forum. Sometimes it does work, and a lot of the time it doesn't. And especially when you talk about the groups of people that you're trying to reach a lot of the time, whether it's the single working mothers who don't have time to participate during the day, or the elderly and disabled that don't have access, you know, a lot of the time it does come down to equity. So I would just encourage the TPA to, you know, really think creatively as a result of their public outreach. And, you know, a lot of the time, especially if it's specific to a project, sometimes the people who care most about the project just can't, you know, they can't get there because they're working, or the times just don't work for them. And so that seemed to be very, very apparent. And it was a big theme in the summit. And I think it's very real. And I think we all see some of this as, you know, being public servants. So I think it's a great plan. And I think the TPA staff does a great job. But I would just continue to, you know, keep pushing the frontier and providing opportunities for those who are often most impacted and yet do not have an opportunity in the traditional time and format to participate.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point. That kind of reminded me that during, again, I keep going back to the Okeechobee study, but just as an example, myself, Cassidy, and one of our other planners rode Palm Train along the corridor and talked to people at bus stops, on the bus, walking to bus stops, to try to get their feedback, because I would probably guess most, if not all, of the people we talked to that day would not be able to show up at a public meeting. Most of those people don't have a vehicle, they rely on public transportation. So that's where we need to meet them. And that's something I think we're definitely going to try to do a lot more of when we really start kicking off the LRTP. And so we're really looking forward to that. And I think that's a really good reminder. It's not always easy. It requires a lot of effort, but I think it's really important to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I don't see any more cards up, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the TPA's PPP, and then I'll open it for discussions.
So moved.
Okay, Brian, do I have a second? Natalie, second. All right. All right. Any discussions before all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on now to item 3, informational items. I think we have 2 of them on the agenda today. So first one will be FDOT Strategic Intermodal System, SIS, Draft 2050 Cost Feasible Plan. FDOT, please.
Okay. Good morning. And my name is Ron Kariva with the Florida Department of Transportation, District 4. I'm the Strategic Intermodal System Coordinator, and I work in the planning office. I'm here to present about the Strategic Intermodal System Cost Feasible Plan and an update on where we are in that process. So quick agenda just to go over what I was going to discuss. It's not a very long presentation, but we'll go into the background and purpose of the cost feasible plan, coordination that's previously been done. There's not a slide about the modal set aside. That's a carryover, but we can discuss that if need be. The draft cost feasible plan, the schedule, and then a question session at the end. So getting into background and purpose, the strategic intermodal system focuses resources on facilities and services that are critical to interregional and interstate trips, international as well. So this system is focused on trips that are leaving the region, not necessarily trips within the region only. Obviously, those trips are important as well. But the background of the system itself is in regards to those larger, higher priority interregional connections and facilities. It's a high priority network. It's important to the state's economy and mobility. On the right, you can see a map for Palm Beach County. Those are all the SIS facilities in Palm Beach County. And it's not necessarily related to the list of projects that's coming, but it is just a map of the facilities that would be eligible for SIS funding. This would include airports and seaports as well. It's not just highways. Most of what you'll hear in this presentation is related to highways, but the system includes Palm Beach Airport, the Port of Palm Beach is on there as well. State Road 80 is also an SIS facility, State Road 710 and the Palm Beach portion, 995, obviously. Florida Turnpike is as well, but it's managed separately by the Turnpike system. Also, there's a link on the bottom there. If you have the presentation, if you ever want to see the atlas, that atlas provides all the SIS facilities in the state. And it's a GIS based layer, but you can access it from anywhere. So the cost feasible plan itself is designed to ensure consistency with the goals of the Florida Transportation Plan and the objectives of the policy plan. And just to step back a little bit, the Florida Transportation Plan is the overarching plan that dictates all of this. If you step down from that, you'll have a SIS policy plan, which fits into the Florida Transportation Plan. And as part of the SIS policy plan and part of the statutes of Florida, we have to update our long range planning for the SIS on a regular basis. It's generally about 5 years. This year, we're doing the cost feasible plan first, and it had something to do with revenue forecasts. And I'm not exactly sure the normal process would be to do the unfunded needs plan first, which is just an unbounded collection of projects that we've determined with coordination and whatnot that is needed for the area on the strategic intermodal system. And then from that list, we try to prioritize and have a recommendation for what we want to become cost feasible. And depending on what the revenue forecast states and the needs for the whole state, we will get a priority list. So in this case, that unfunded plan is actually going to be happening after this process. So we're knee deep into the cost feasible plan, but we will be reaching out separately for the unfunded plan after this is developed. Once you get inside that cost feasible plan, you have the second 5, which is you're normally used to the also the transportation work program, which is 5 years. We go out between the 5th year or the 6th year, you call it, to the 10th year. There's a plan for that as well. That's updated yearly. And then there's the actual work program first 5 plan that is updated yearly as well. That's kind of the process as it brings it down from the top to the bottom. So just in regards to the coordination that occurred previously, we had a joint workshop back in 2022 on August the 5th with stakeholders in the region, including staff from Palm Beach TPA, other MPOs in the area, and some regional planning councils. We were discussing the intent of the strategic intermodal system, which is kind of what I just went over, a tentative schedule for this plan, as well as what we're proposing FDOT, and then we got some recommendations from the TPA staff as well, from each agency. So this list here is a draft list, what we got back from our request. So just to highlight quickly, if you see the gray, those gray numbers are ones we asked for, but they did not make the list in the sense of the revenue forecast and prioritization process from central office was saying they're not feasible at this time. Obviously, those can carry right over into the unfunded needs plan. But the other colors are the time bands that we requested the projects, or I'm sorry, they're the time bands we received them in. They may not match the request. I don't have a list right now of the time bands we requested, but those are the time bands that we received tentatively. So there's several projects on the list. Some have the entire project funded, all the phases needed, PD&E, design, right-of-way construction if need be. And several of them have some phases funded and not complete, but partially funded. So we'll say it that way. There's most of these projects are on I-95 and a lot of the money is there. There's managed lanes projects on there that are starting down around Linton and moving northwards. So a lot of the projects encompass that all the way up to north of Okeechobee. and including all the way to the county line up in Martin. So there's various phases of that in here. And there's also the I-95 interchange of State Road 80 is on here as well, but it's not feasible. We're still currently studying that, to be honest, but it is on the list as a need. 710 is also on here from Congress to Palm Beach. I think it's here because there's still some ongoing stuff there. I'm not recalling the exact nature of that project and what's on there. But State Road 80, long range vision of State Road 80, we did a master plan or an action plan, sorry, a while back on that. That's where these numbers are coming from. And we had some requests on that. And then also some US 27 projects for ITS and freight related projects. And then also to note, there's a bypass on here listed for around Belglade area. So just a quick schedule, as I went over before, we had already done some outreach. We had already started the process. We're knee deep in it. So everything towards the left of it's already happened. But where we're at now is we're in that review process. So that list that I just presented to you has been presented to us. It's been provided to TPA staff as well. And we're reviewing that and getting our comments back to our central office. When that is finalized and all the comments are received, we will then go through a process where central office will finalize that draft, and then that draft will become the cost feasible plan once they finalize it, and then it will be published. And they're hoping to do that by May. They understand that if you see the dates on the timeline, you can see this was supposed to occur in February. We're in March right now. So we're still coordinating with TPA staff, and then we plan to present to the board as well. So we will accept those comments into that timeframe past what's on this chart here. But it's generally because we just got the actual cost feasible plan draft not too long ago. So we're a little bit behind schedule, I guess, if you want to say it that way. And then just a question slide here and a safety message. If you're involved in a crash, stay at the scene and call for help. Safety is a high priority for the department, and I'll also take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Staff, do we have any public comments on this item?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
All right, then.
I just have one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a general comment. The Florida Transportation Plan, every 5 years, that develops policies and a statewide plan that everything else is supposed to follow from. If the policies focus on multimodal transportation and transit and emphasize those things, but that doesn't follow through to the funding criteria. So there's a mismatch there, and we just take the opportunities we get to point that out. I don't know if maybe in this round the policies and the criteria will begin to match up better, but that's just a comment we like to have understood. And then also for the transit facilities all up and down for instance, the Tri-Rail corridor, even the stations in Miami and Broward still serve Palm Beach. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex?
I guess just a comment question
Yes.
on couple of the projects that you identified there. This had to do with the managed lanes
Yes.
projects on I-95 and kind of the limits of the projects. I see that one of them goes from 6th Avenue South and Lake Worth to Okeechobee Boulevard. Then there's another one identified from Okeechobee Boulevard, I believe, all the way to Indiantown. Something that West Palm Beach had referenced and as comments to FDOT sometime last year was the concern that Okeechobee Boulevard was going to be impacted twice by construction as a result of this delineation. Okeechobee Boulevard is already a corridor, a roadway with a lot of challenges. It's the main entrance to downtown. But if we're going to have, let's say, two projects impacting Okeechobee Boulevard, yes, one is going to be from the south side, then another one from the north side. There's going to be significant impacts on Okeechobee Boulevard twice. So what we were suggesting is to kind of change the limits of those two projects so that there will be impacts to Okeechobee Boulevard from a construction standpoint once as opposed to twice. Those were comments that we provided again when we received some requests for comments that had to do more with multimodal comments on the combination of I-95 and State Road 80 projects, which was a little bit confusing to us. We were asked to provide comments on both projects at the same time. It was like one number for that project. But again, going back to the issue is, why was the determination to end one on Okeechobee and then start the next one there? And I understand you want to have some significant kind of landmarks, crossroads, but again, our concern was that then there's going to be construction impacts on Okeechobee that was going to happen twice, and these projects take a while. So it's going to be a lot of extra issues on Okeechobee Boulevard for a number of years as a result of having two projects impacting it as opposed to one.
So the intent of the breakdown of the limits was to put it into more sizable chunks that could be funded. They're already very expensive projects, and pushing just that one limit from 95 from Linton to 6th is almost $1 billion. So that's where that process came from. The intent is to study the State Road 80 interchange, the impacts of the airport in the area, the managed lanes on 95 through Belvedere as well, and Okeechobee in one study to try to come up with a plan that works for all of those interchanges and the managed lanes through that area. In regards to construction, this can be broken up if needed and be adjusted as time goes in. This is mainly to establish the need of the whole area, but we can continue to work with anyone in regards to that. We don't intend to work on Okeechobee twice, but the thing of, there may, understandably, when you start working on the managed lanes north of Okeechobee, it may impact Okeechobee. So that's a good thing to consider as well. But the actual work at Okeechobee, we would want to have that coordinated through that whole area.
The issue wasn't necessarily work on Okeechobee itself, but if you're doing work just south on I-95, just south of Okeechobee in one project, and then next you are doing work just north of Okeechobee in another one, that impacts Okeechobee. Even though you may not be necessarily working on Okeechobee itself. And again, it's a corridor that is a roadway that is challenged already. And that's one of the reasons why the TPA is working on this multimodal study plan for Okeechobee Boulevard. So that was kind of the concern. We think that, again, the limits of eventually when construction happens should be discussed further so that, again, we can minimize any construction impacts that may be affecting Okeechobee, even though you may not be doing work on Okeechobee at the time.
Understood. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I have a question. There are some routes that are not on the CIS plan, but they call them, I forgot, support CIS or something like that, like 45th Street, which is a county-owned road. So those roads, I forgot what you call them.
But 45th Street's a connector.
CIS
of it
connector
are-
or
yeah,
whatever, yeah.
They,
So
it is, go
they
ahead, sir.
don't qualify, those roads don't qualify for any financial support or anything from, as part of the CIS program and funding.
On Okeechobee, there wasn't any capacity projects that have been identified for recommendation from the portion that was a connector, but it's something we can definitely look into if there's I feel there's a need there. The port itself, which it's a connector for Port Palm Beach, is separate from this, but is also eligible for its own project. So I'm thinking you're unrelated to that. You're just talking specifically about 45th, but yes, we can have those discussions.
Very good. Other question is SR 80 Binks Forest to Royal Palm Beach Boulevard. There were interesting alternatives that were proposed by ADOT a while ago.
Mhm.
Do you know where is that, in terms of scheduling? When do you expect that this project will pick up and will come to actual selection of alternative and design and construction?
So we'd like to start PD&E in the next 10 years. Getting it onto this plan, because none of the phases are funded at this time for any advanced study of that. Getting it onto this plan gets it out into a time band longer than 10 years from now, but it's a start, and then we can try to bring it in. But that's the goal, is to start studying it in the next 10 years. Obviously, a PD&E is needed to vet out anything that came out of the action plan, and then compare, multiple alternatives to what could be possible out there.
And at that point, the alternative is not set, right? Even though I would imagine that since you have to come up with a cost estimate and put it in the
Yes.
budget, then you should have at least an idea about what you want to do there, because the alternatives have tremendously different costs to them. So are you set on the alternatives, or that will still be evaluated again when you get closer to the actual design and PD&E at least?
It will be evaluated again, but it's usually used as a basis of one of the alternatives for the PD&E. It came out of the action plan as the recommended alternative. It is what's being used to come up with these cost estimates for now, but it is not set to, at this time, we'll have to go through the more advanced, studies.
Yeah, and I recall back then, part of the evaluation was also looking at public transit along that corridor.
Right.
Very good. Thank you. If no more questions or comments, then thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Let's move on to item 3B. TPA Vision 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan, and Nathan again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so I'm really pleased to come and talk to you guys today about Vision 2050. That is a date that is 27 years into the future. It's hard to imagine what transportation is going to look like when we get 27 years into the future. And so I want to invite you guys to journey back with me and think about where we've come from in the last 27 years, 1996. So grounding this conversation today about what the future of transportation will look like with that 27 years of advancements, enhancements in technology. It's 1996, the first Mission Impossible just released in theaters. So Tom Cruise, 27 years later, still doing the same thing, saving the world. But safest car on the road is a Volvo 850, arguably. It recently introduced side impact airbags, curtain airbags, the ones that come out of the corners of the car. Those didn't come out for another 2 years. So this is, very basic technology compared to what we have today. One of the first smartphones, the Nokia 7000 communicator. And we're talking about something that would be like taking your eyeglass case, fill it with coins and stick it in your pocket. Really big, black and white screen, actual keys. So that's where we were 27 years ago. Fast forward to today, what do we have? We've got Teslas, cars that can basically drive themselves. They have technology and safety enhancements in them that are just unbelievable. Detection systems that can talk with the infrastructure and the environment around them. We're starting to see the first deployments of that ITS technology for communication. These cars, you can summon them with your cell phone. It's one of the features that they highlight on the website. So, the enhancements that we have seen, we can't even imagine what we're going to see 27 years into the future. But this gives us an idea of what we can accomplish over that time frame. Our cell phones are now so big that it's like putting an iPad in your pocket. So color touch screens, there's a lot of enhancements that we're going to start to see enter into the transportation sector. It's a really exciting time to be focusing on those changes and how they're going to influence travel. It's part of the reason that I came here to TPA. So I'm excited to kick off this long range transportation plan. Wanted to give you that background before we start this conversation. So for anybody who's newer to the committee, this may be an introduction, but I imagine a lot of you are already familiar with what this plan is. So it is one of our core products, one of the, it's the farthest looking core product that we have, looking at that 25-year vision for what transportation is going to look like in Palm Beach County. We're establishing the region's goals. What do we want to be when we grow up? Where do we see ourselves at that 2050 point in time? We're going to identify what those significant regionally significant infrastructure investments are going to be. So this isn't, how do we introduce a sidewalk in a neighborhood to make it easier to walk to the neighbors? It's, what are those investments we're going to make it easier to travel around our region, out of our region, and into, internationally, really. We have international opportunities to connect this region to the world. The good news is we're thinking about that uncertainty 25 years into the future is that this plan does get updated every 5 years. So we're trying to shine a light on what the future looks like at the 2050 point, but we do have the opportunity next 5 years to go back and sharpen our pencils again with a little bit more certainty as those changes occur. I want to talk a little bit about what drives transportation. Historically, when we've talked about transportation, the immediate correlation is traffic. So how are we going to address all the people who are moving here, the cars that we have in our communities? And so we could continue to work under that traditional approach, but we know that TPA has been very good about forward thinking. How can we address transportation with alternatives? How can we move people differently? How can we increase efficiency? So that's all about introducing new options. Maybe it is a streetcar on Okeechobee. Maybe it's enhanced bus on State Route 80. So there are a lot of different ways that we can move people more efficiently. And it might even be a light touch. HOV lanes, something that, we've got the express toll lanes coming on 95 that you just heard about. So there are some ways that we can be a little bit more creative with how we use those systems. But what's really great as we're thinking about transportation is these are investments that can improve quality of life in our communities if we do it right. So as we're thinking about the vision, as we're establishing what we want to be in the year 2050, hopefully we're viewing that through a lens of quality of life. How can these investments make our communities better places to live? This is a results-oriented plan. So last month, when we came and talked with you about performance measures, I want to reemphasize, this is a performance-based approach. So as ideas get put on the table, it's not just a politically driven decision. We are viewing everything through a performance-based lens. So we need to make sure that as a project is screened, it is going to improve performance. It's going to enhance one of those performance measures. If it doesn't, maybe it needs to be rescoped. But we certainly don't want to make investments that are not going to yield some benefit to our region. One of the points that I wanted to highlight to this group specifically is that this is a comprehensive list of our needs and desires. So if you don't have a plan for how you're going to improve transportation in your region, it's a little bit late to be thinking about that. Hopefully you have ideas that you already have put down in your comprehensive plans or in a CIP, something that's, that you want to get funded that's not been funded yet. If you haven't done that, now's the time to start thinking about that. We will be putting out a call for projects, and I want to encourage everybody in this committee specifically, think about what projects you might put forward for us to be reviewing to include in this next update. Because the reality is these are financially constrained documents. We can put things in as a desire, but we cannot fund them if there's not available funding and if they don't meet that metric of improving regional connectivity. We have a couple of new features and a couple highlights that we wanted to just share with everybody as we kick off this process. The first two are just emphasis areas. So the bipartisan infrastructure law introduced a new feature that allows us to do what they call housing linkage. So we can look at transportation and where people live and start to think about how transportation relates to how people travel from where they live. So that housing linkage is a very great opportunity for us to think a little bit differently with that land use transportation connection. It's not as comprehensive as I'd like it to be, but it certainly is a good opportunity for us to look at that correlation. And then there's another major emphasis on equity and justice. You'll hear a lot of folks talk about that. This sort of spins off of 25 years of history of environmental justice, but now we're looking at, how have transportation facilities impacted communities? How can we go back and restore some of that connectivity? So this is a great opportunity for us to maybe go back and repair some of the fragmented connections that transportation has introduced in our urban communities specifically. So maybe you're in the I-95 corridor, these that we live in, and they may be a little bit less accommodating for folks who live there today. As we're looking at what that future is going to be, we also have scenario planning. That's a tool that allows us to test different ideas, different facilities that we might try to introduce, different technologies that we might want to see what that influence may be in that future year. So transit has been historically a major emphasis at TPA. So we'll continue to study the 561 corridors and see how those investments will influence how we travel around our region. And then we've heard from this committee, and I'm sure others, the influence of automation, those technology enhancements that I mentioned. So autonomous, connected, and electric vehicles are major focus areas that we don't know exactly where we'll be in that 27-year future, but we know that there's going to be some influence in how we travel based on those changes in technology in vehicles and how we communicate between those vehicles and infrastructure. Wanted to highlight a couple of first steps. This is, we're not going to eat the elephant all at once, so to speak. So we have a first step is just to go back and really validate the goals and objectives. These goals come directly out of the 2045 plan. So we'll be taking another look. Like I said, we're bringing this back 5 years later and looking at our goals. I think the first that I want to look at specifically is that goal of preserve, because I think there's certainly more of like a resiliency aspect to looking at that particular goal. But you hear folks from TPA say this all the time: safe, efficient, connected, multimodal. It's almost a tagline here. So we're going to go through a validation process to see where we might need to tweak or tailor any of our goals, bring that back, and make sure that we have the right vision. And that's something we'll continue to explore as we go through the whole cycle over 2 years of developing this plan. And then the next one is developing a public involvement plan. And I heard a lot of what you were saying, all of you, about this. John, I think the example you gave about best practices, or Natalie about going to the communities, not doing the traditional thing. So public involvement for me is about going to the people. It's not about bringing the people to you. So I think you'll see a lot of that as we take this plan through that process. So just wanted to respond to what we were hearing today. I didn't tailor this slide to be responsive, but certainly that's an approach that I believe very strongly in, that we need to go to the people. It also means that we want to have open communication with our municipal communities, with our stakeholders. So we'd certainly want to be having dialogue with you as we go through the process, hearing what your visions are for our Vision 2050 document. As a reminder, if you have not already given us contact information, we'd invite you to send me an email. I'll make sure that you're included on our stakeholder list, and I'll highlight how folks who are not part of that group can also stay engaged. Our schedule. So again, this 2-year process to develop this plan. The first part of the process is the early spring timeframe. We will validate and confirm what our goals and objectives are. We will have opportunities to tweak that throughout the process, but we want to get a good, firm understanding of what those goals are up front, so that can help inform the rest of the process. We'll go through a needs assessment and project evaluation process this winter. So that's where we'll be looking at projects, starting to get things ready to put into the modeling effort. So this is where the idea generation before testing will occur later this year. We'll get into that modeling and scenario development process in coordination with our regional partners. This is a process that we go through with all the South Florida, the 3 counties, Miami-Dade and Broward. So we'll go through that process and complete hopefully early in the spring of next year. And then the plan review and final adoption will occur towards the end of next year. Final adoption drop dead date is December, but we hope to bring everybody information well in advance of that date, so we meet our regulatory requirements to adopt on time. For folks who want to stay engaged, who are not part of the our existing stakeholders, our municipal and stakeholder list, folks will be able to sign up on our LRTP page, long range transportation plan page. And we will also be posting information as we go through the process. So we've included the URL here so folks can click to it. The existing page is still up. We're in the process of finalizing an update. So you should see very soon some information about where we stand. This schedule is posted there, contact information. And then as we schedule meetings, as we release information, it'll all go to this page. So folks can continue to stay informed and know where to meet with us and provide their input. And as we get to the point in the process where we have materials, you can review, provide comments, all of that's going to be hosted right on our brand new webpage. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. It's hard to establish eye contact with that thing there. So staff, do we have any public comments on this item?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Members of the committee, do you have any? Okay. Vicky?
Well, thank you for the presentation. I'd like to understand more about the housing linkage and a related thought. To my understanding, and I mean, it's been years since I've worked with this more closely, but to my understanding, the DOT models are based significantly on input from local governments on their master plans, their comprehensive plans, their land use plan. And often what happens is then the local government will suddenly convert open space or ag land for housing development. So I'd like to understand, you know, how that housing linkage is going to be looked at in that regard.
Yeah, I'll say the housing linkage is an entirely new criteria and it's an option. So the way it was put in the bipartisan infrastructure law is that we have the opportunity to review housing, and I would say housing policy is maybe the way the Fed intended for that to be framed as maybe transportation is driving decision making more than responding to that socioeconomic, where's growth occurring, how do we plan for growth? So if I had to speculate, I would say that is what the intent of the federal government was, is to allow transportation planning agencies more leeway to be prescriptive. I would say that, we're working through a traditional process at this point of establishing where has growth occurred, where is growth anticipated to occur, and then, generating appropriate assumptions in our regional modeling effort. And we will be exploring with the consultant team to determine, what are the opportunities where we can be more creative or more thoughtful in how housing influences this process. We don't fully understand what that's going to mean. So I look forward to exploring that further and sharing it with the committees and board.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Sorry, Kim.
Thank you for the overview. Along those lines, related to that housing comment and your description of that, one of your slides is titled "What Drives Transportation?" And it's limited to traffic, quality of life. There's a third factor, infrastructure, maybe. Options. So a suggestion. So because the LRTP process is an opportunity for education, right? And this TPA has really been a leader in helping communities and stakeholders understand the relationship between transportation and land use, which is really the key. So an idea is to add a land use box, right, to that, because that's the basis for the analysis, right? Where's growth going to go? Where has it been? How does that affect our facilities? So just a suggestion to you.
Yeah, point well taken. I've tried to keep that slide very high level.
It's
if you
lean,
will.
right? But
Very
I thought
lean.
you could do 4 boxes, not 3, and it would fit okay.
And I am, as a planner, I acknowledge that transportation and land use is the strongest connection that we need to make as an agency, because that really has driven a lot of, I tried to allude to it in the presentation, like I-95, how transportation and land use have worked together as an area urbanizes is incredibly important. But at the same time, when you look at the suburban communities, we planned for and gotten what we what we plan for. There's a real poor linkage there between the two and, you know, trying to plan in those very, I'll call them very different environments. And then we have small towns out in the glades. So, and we really have these three unique contexts that we have to think about that connection between land use and transportation. I hope you'll hear more of that as we get into the further into the process of updating this plan.
I appreciate that and expect that we will. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. So, because
Thank you.
it's hard sometimes to remind communities that land use and transportation live in the same house. They're actually married. So, and just because you do something to a roadway and don't consider the land use implications, it doesn't mean you make the situation any better. So just a suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you. Amanda, I think you have a public comment here, and after that, we'll go to Brian.
Yes, there is a public comment virtually from Khurshid Mahon Udin. Sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong. We'll pull up. You should be able to unmute and give us 1 moment to pull up the timer. Right.
Go ahead.
Kashid Mahyuddin with Palm Beach County Planning. I just recently read an article which talks about actually 2050 technologies, and I loved your slide and your presentation, especially on the comparison between 27 years before and now. I would say that if you can add another picture in there and have some of the future technologies such as, and that article talked about electric vertical takeoff vehicles. You know, those are coming to Palm Beach International Airport pretty soon. It also talked about those Elon Musk type tunnels which do not have friction, and those kind of capsules that can go extremely fast. They can talk 300, 400 miles per hour. Those are the future. And also it talks about the supersonic jets coming back. So that is the future technology. And also, if you can have a little bit more, for example, what was the mode split in 27 years ago versus now? How are the trends? If that can be added, that would be wonderful too. And from ITE, we had the tip generation from 96 versus how much office tips are generated now. Those kind of, with all these technologies, those kind of comparisons will give probably a little bit more insight that what's happening with the land uses, how much tips are being generated now versus what was 27 years ago. The technology, when we talked about train, I think it started in 19th century and now we are in 21st century. It's a pretty old technology. Timing and personal mobility seems to be very important in future. But yeah, that slide can expand a little bit, and wonderful job, wonderful presentation. Loved it. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it, Amanda. All right, Brian.
Thank you, Mo. I just wanted to sort of piggyback on what Ms. Delaney said, that land use is critical, but I also wanted to point out in Palm Beach County, we were effectively a build out, which means the county is now acting more like a municipality. We do not have the suburban land anymore. We are effectively there. So it's now infill, it's redevelopment. And the problem with land use, and I think most of the municipalities can relate to this, you're built at your future land use. So redevelopment has to then go above it. And then it's going to go significantly above it. It's the problem. And I didn't get to say this in our meeting with you all yesterday, was we don't know what that's going to look like yet. And you're here planning for it. So we don't have a vision yet established for what the redevelopment looks like in a lot of these places where it's going to occur. And also to what Ms. Katana said, the other thing that we have in South Florida that's a source of land is not the conversion of ag land, which we do go through, but also we have golf course conversions. And that's going to be a very challenging thing because of the way they were designed, and they're very sinewy and how they're laid out. But we have seen that in the county, and there are other golf courses. We've been over golf for a half century, and now we're looking at that contraction. But the constraints of where those things can connect to road networks or other things that you're going to have to look at. And I can't tell you which golf course will convert or when, but that is the other major challenge from a land use perspective you're going to see, is how those connect into that road network and where they're going to go. So there's a lot of unknowns in trying to bring that in. And we're happy to work with you, but that's something that's going to be a very constrained thing, but understand the county is going to be looking more like a municipality from this point despite its size. So just wanted to put that out there, and good work.
Very good. Thank you. Kim again.
Just a response, Brian, to that. We're working with the TPA staff to help inform that because it's very hard to get your arms around the rationality of what kind of redevelopment is possible, right? And we have legislation moving through the process that opens the door to some pretty intense affordable housing densities and intensities that we haven't seen prior. So we're working with the TPA staff and the LRTP team to try to introduce some rationality around that question, like how much redevelopment should we consider? And so one of those pieces that's going to precede the transportation analysis is looking at the 561 corridors, because those are identified as kind of the places where we think the most density is likely going to be given the transportation network, and starting to model the potential build out conditions based on a TOD typology, if you will. So there are, ballpark estimate about 110 station locations. Theoretically, those are going to be naturally the magnets for redevelopment to occur. And then applying a methodology that looks at a TOD typology that's appropriate for Palm Beach County. Some would be neighborhood center stations, some would be town centers, regional centers, park and rides, employment centers, and modeling the difference or the delta between existing built conditions and potential redevelopment conditions. So kind of on an aggregated basis, but you're right. That's a really tricky point to figure out. And that's our play, right? If we can't get redevelopment figured out in Eastern Palm Beach County, we will have a very tough time moving regardless of the transportation network that we think we can impose. So there is some thinking behind that. It's going to take a lot of analysis, and this committee is one of those sources that's going to help inform that effort. But that is one of the things that TPA has identified as a need, and we're working towards that.
Do you want to go on?
Yeah,
Go
if I could just respond to that, and all well taken, and it's not a contrary point. The thing is you can plan the system, but with this, the way that development works here is you're going to have to react to where the redevelopment shows up. You can have the plan that it's going to be on this corridor and prioritize a corridor, but the redevelopment will occur where the market is going to decide that it's going to occur. So that's the issue, is you can have, these are priority corridors, but hey, someone wants to go redevelop on US 1. We saw this in just north of Palm Beach Gardens. We had a dead strip mall. It was not the place anyone thought redevelopment was going to occur. You could look at it and say it was a borderline blighted, plaza, and it was appropriate. That was not where I think anyone would have put money on. That was going to be our first major infill redevelopment project in the county, but it was.
So, and this is a long conversation. for
Yeah.
this matter, so, but offline, so we can have that chat, because those are absolutely the trends that we see. Like the retrofit of the suburban mall, that's a big play for us going forward. So we have a chance to identify those spots. Existing intact single family residential, that's not likely going to redevelop with the ownership pattern. But dead strip malls, older office parks, low intensity uses on premium transportation corridors, yeah, that's where the money is. So, but again, offline, sorry.
Great, thank you. Do you have any more, Brian? Okay, thank you. Great presentation. I want to applaud you for early reach out to all of us, requesting that we provide you, all of us, provide you contact information about individuals who would be in contact with you on this subject. I could see the passion and enthusiasm in your approach to the LRTP process and your good knowledge of it. I applaud you for that. I want to just ask a question, and it seems like you have already thought about this. You are full aware of the quick moving parts in terms of the way we live now, we conduct our business, we do work from home or remotely, technology advances, not in terms of transportation infrastructure itself or transportation modes, but rather also on the way we conduct business. So there are a lot of moving parts that are kind of untraditional, but still it seems like we are still using the same traditional old methods in developing our RTPs. We are using the same model, origin, destination, and zones, etc., employment, etc. So the question is, and probably you don't have to answer this one, is probably just make sure that we are fully aware of this and try to find a way to reflect that that some of these assumptions are not valid and they are fluid and going to be changing and changing rapidly. So that's important to keep in mind. And I want to also use the opportunity to reflect that most of the transportation planning is focused on the major roadway system. And Palm Beach County is looking forward to working with you and your team on providing input. Palm Beach County does maintain almost half of all the major roadway system in the county. The other half is maintained by FDOT. So we will be working closely with you on this. And one more thing I want to touch on, I think you touched on the goals or values that are going to be guiding this process. And one of them you started with preservation and then with safety. And absolutely, these are the two top most important things. And then you went to the third one was efficiency. And I would understand under efficiency, meaning that the most cost feasible mode of and or way of transporting people and goods, while at the same time, the efficiency is about travel time and cost of the whatever mode and et cetera is used. And I want to emphasize that. And I have trouble almost always when I hear people saying multimodalism. Our goal is to increase the modes of transportation that we have. And we want to promote certain type of modes or others. I think that should not be the goal. The goal is to reduce, after of course, preservation and safety, these are first, but after that, our goal is to make it efficient. And efficiency means cost and the cost means time and travel time. So travel time needs to be a core here. And if a certain mode of transportation shows and proves to be after we evaluate reaching that goal, and then that will be the one that we want to focus on planning on building and implementing. So I just want to emphasize that we need to deal with actual things. When you want to travel anywhere or you want to do anything, you ask your navigation system, and the only thing that will talk about is travel time, how much time it will take you, and your planning time, which is the reliability of travel time. So I want to just emphasize that. And yeah, that's it. And I appreciate your enthusiasm again, and we'll be looking forward to working with you on this.
Yeah, I'll say, your comments are well appreciated. We look forward to working everybody. I'll say as my, concluding remarks that the values around this table are going to be very different depending on the character of your community. And, we look forward to exploring what transportation means in your part of our region and discussing those goals and how they relate to the types of projects we're going to bring forward. So that is, it's really exciting to be at the beginning of this process. We look forward to having those conversations. It's going to be a pretty intense, almost 2 years, because we're now, in the third month into this process, but it's going to be a pretty intense process. And we look forward to having those conversations and really massaging out what we're going to put forward as a recommendation ultimately in December of 2024.
Awesome.
Comments?
Thank you. Vicky?
Yeah, I have just one more question. Is there any, do we look at air quality, air pollution at all when we develop these plans?
I would say air quality, we're in an attainment currently under attainment status. So air quality specifically, I won't say specifically how that relates to this
Well, that
process.
can change.
Exactly.
More cars
so
on the road.
I would refer back to my initial point on the goals. That goal 1 captures all of our environment and resiliency sort of aspects, and the influence of climate change, things like that are really where we need to be shaping that conversation of, how resilient is our transportation network. So we will be exploring the health impacts, how electric vehicles are influencing emissions. All of those sort of factors will be features that we want to look at as we go through this planning process and
Right.
see a bright future, if you will, as we
And
look at some of
I
those
think-
areas and maybe some threat as we think about the impacts of the environment and, how sensitive some of our transportation infrastructure is to climate change. And we're already starting to see some signs of that.
Yeah, the most recent information I have from DOT on EVs is that it'll be about a 30-year acceptance period. So, you're looking 30 years out there. And if we're going to increase cars on the road, then we're going to increase air pollution. And just one final comment, we are in an attainment area, but at one point we weren't. But the standards were then reset and suddenly we were. So it depends on where the standards are set. And it's a factor in human health. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Nathan. And that brings us to the final item before we adjourn. So items, that's administrative items. Items 4A through 4C, I believe, right? Are informational only. There will be no staff presentations unless requested by a committee member. Do we have any requests or any? All right. So are there any public comments on this?
No.
Thank you. Our next TAC meeting is scheduled for April 5th, 2023. At this time, we adjourn our meeting. Thank you.